How's it going, everybody? Daner here with North Central Coins, and today I'm joined by a special guest, my friend Cole, aka Burlington Bullion on Instagram. Now, he has actually joined me once before here, and we did an interview particularly on Canadian specimen coins. He is what I would consider an expert. If I'm like Darth Vader in Canadian coins, he is the Emperor Palpatine, best way I can put it. But he has an incredible wealth of knowledge when it comes to Canadian coins, and basically anytime I have an error or anything that I think is skeptical or could be worth money, I message him. He's the first person I talk to, and this guy can save you a lot of time and money when it comes to Canadian coins. He also sells online, particularly specimen coins are his specialty. So if you would like to check out some of his amazing selection, then click the links down in the description. I'll leave a link for his Instagram and his stores down below. But we're gonna start this interview off. I got lots of questions. Are you ready, Cole?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for having me.
No problem. All right, let's do this, guys. All right, so I've assembled a list of questions here that I think just about hits all of the different marks for what people want to know right now when it comes to Canadian coins. They are pretty hot right now, and there is definitely some interest growing in the online community, so it is a good time to have him on. I think this video is timely. But to start things off, I just wanted to for you to introduce yourself to the people, and when did you first start your coin collecting journey, and what got you into coin collecting?
Yeah, I think like a lot of other Canadian coin collectors, what first kind of drew me in were the commemorative issues in circulation. I had an uncle who was really big on coin roll hunting, and every time we'd go up to the family cottage, family reunion, he'd be over in the corner cracking open rolls, going through them. So I think that's kind of where my interest stemmed.
Your uncle was coin roll hunting at family reunions?
Yes, he was.
That's a level of commitment right there.
Yeah, you gotta get the rolls in, right?
Oh yeah.
But that's definitely where the interest stemmed, and through that, every Christmas, birthdays, the newest RCM 20 for 20 or a nice old silver dollar was what I'd expect to get from him. And through that, he kind of taught me the ropes, pull out pennies before 1999, pull out your nickel, set it aside for a rainy day. And through that, like everybody else, there I was going through my change, going through my piggy banks, trying to find anything of interest, really.
All right. Okay, another question that I wanted to ask someone that is a little bit deeper into the coin world is, what would you actually classify makes a coin rare and valuable? Like, what is it that people are looking for that they're willing to pay premiums for on different levels? Like, let's say for a low grade coin, what are things you can look for? And then also for high grade examples, if that makes sense.
Right. When I think about rarity, you kind of got to look at it from two different angles. There's absolute rarity, which is when you're looking at coins with basically no examples that survived. And then there's conditional rarities, something like the 1944 penny, which you can't find pretty much above MS65.
Yeah.
But in circulated condition, you can find...
So let's just touch on that briefly, because I have mentioned it in some of my videos and coin roll hunts. Some of the World War II pennies, particularly the 1944, why is it that not many high-grade examples of that penny survived?
Well, you have to think about the situation in the mint when they were producing them. The issue you'll find with a lot of 1944s is they're struck poorly, they have porous surfaces, and generally they don't hit that mark of a gem grade coin, even if the surfaces are pristine.
Okay.
So that's the issue you run into.
So it's not necessarily like a circulation issue, like people were using them more, as much as they came out of the mint with flaws and errors that year that don't let them attribute as high on the scale.
Exactly. The quality overall of that issue in general was lower than, say, for example, a 1947 Maple Leaf, which you can find in gem very, very easily.
So is there something on the opposite end of that, like certain years that are known for having higher strike qualities, or like specimen or proof strikes that are known for being extra beautiful?
Yeah, one of the best places to kind of look for coins that almost always are in nice condition are proof-like sets. The silver proof-likes 1967 and prior, generally straight from the plyofilm, are going to be in that 65 to 66 range. So that's where you're going to expect to see higher grades a little more frequently, and there are some exceptions. I've had proof-like sets that have had fingerprints from the mint. I've had proof-like sets that have been scratched in the plyofilm. So not always, but in general, if you have an original sealed proof-like set, you're around that 65, 66 range most times.
When it comes to older silver proof sets, I know for some modern proof sets that there can actually be proof sets that can be attributed with errors, like certain coins are flipped the wrong way and stuff. Are there older proof sets that have those kind of attributions, or?
There's a few, but it's all in the same sort of, classification. One coin's flipped the other way. The 1967, sometimes you'll see the dollar has a slight rotation, as do some of the other coins. And in really rarer examples, there's like the 1964 missing dot.
Okay.
People will look for that, and they do still exist. They're out there. You can definitely cherry pick them from dealers still.
Your best chance usually for that kind of stuff at this point, I would guess, is like sealed boxes where you get like, what is it, 5 sets in a sealed box, or what would be your suggestion?
The problem with the sealed boxes is 9 times out of 10, if you're buying them, they're still sealed. When you open them, they're all going to be the same type of set. They're all going to be struck consecutively. They all would have been produced near the same time. So it's either a big winner, and sometimes that does happen for sure, but 9 times out of 10, they're all just average condition, proof-like sets, nothing too spectacular.
Does it ever happen where you break open one of these boxes and they're all just like horribly toned and they all just look ugly, or are they usually pretty good looking, or like how does it go?
They're going to be nice. It's just a question of, are they all just what you expect to see from a proof-like set, or do they maybe have exceptional cameo that would kind of set them apart from the masses?
What is it that actually causes cameo? It's like a liquid or something like that. It's not grease, but it's like some extra something that's causing the process to happen. Like when I was making the video, it was like, I don't know if there's like something on the dies or like something that, and then it like slowly wears off, and as it wears off, the cameo fades or something like that. Like how does that affect the cameo process?
Essentially, when the mint was producing dies for proof-like sets, for proof sets later on, they'd finish the dies by acid etching the surface.
Yes.
And that acid etch would kind of create these microscopic, divots and valleys that create that frosted appearance. It traps light, deflects it, and then they polish off the background.
Okay.
So you're going to have these devices that have this acid etched, super frosted white kind of, it's the same thing as frosted glass, right?
Okay.
They're creating this surface that bounces light off and then polishing the background to have a nice deep mirror finish.
So when a cameo occurs on a circulation or a business strike, it's the same thing, but I'm guessing it's only for the first couple that they strike, and then it wears off very quickly. So
similar process. I can't speak to if they would have acid etched the business dies, but definitely when they're preparing the dies, after they get to that final stage of doing the final polish, whatever happened beforehand may have caused that coin to have a little bit of cameo contrast. And yeah, the first maybe 100,000 coins or something that are struck off those dies have a little bit of cameo appearance.
So it's more common to have a cameo on a proof-like or a specimen coin than a business strike usually?
Exactly. When we're talking about specimens, it kind of depends the era.
Okay.
But proof-likes, especially the later years, 62 onward, they were trying to get that frosted appearance. And with that, a lot of the times you will expect to see a little bit of cameo, but those really deep contrast examples are pretty few and far between.
I got you. On eBay, I noticed once, I don't know if it was a 1944 or 1945 World War II V-nickel, and it had an ultra heavy cameo, and I think it was selling for like $1,200 or $1,500 or something like that.
Yeah.
So if you look up like the MS65 book value, it's like anywhere from $50 to $100 depending on the day. But when you add the ultra heavy cameo designation, it increases the value like tenfold. So that's an absolute crazy price jump.
Mm-hmm.
And like, what is more desirable for a collector like you? Would you rather have an SP65 1945 V-nickel, or would you rather have something that's super one of a kind, kind of like an MS65 ultra heavy cameo 1945 nickel? What's more appealing to an experienced collector?
With that sort of thing, it kind of goes back to that rarity conversation, where there's the absolute rarity and then there is, conditional rarity. When you think about a 45 nickel with ultra heavy cameo as a business strike, it might be one of a kind. There might be 10 more out there. Yeah. Certainly something that you don't see every day. I tend to prefer the absolute rarity for my own collection. I like looking for pieces that maybe only had 100, 150 made. And so through that lens, I'd probably go the specimen route. Especially that date in particular is a really good date. But even on a commoner issue, unless it's something that has that mix of absurd quality as well as the cameo contrast, I'd probably go away from the conditional rarity and try to get something that itself just doesn't exist.
Gotcha. One thing I definitely wanted to touch on in this interview was the process of getting your coins graded here in Canada. It can be very complicated. There's a lot of different options out there. There's Canadian companies, and then there's some very well-known US companies. So I was wondering if you could just weigh in and tell us some of the pros and cons to sending your coin to be graded at ICCS in Toronto. That's the budget option. And what pieces you might want to send to PCGS or NGC.
Yeah, as you mentioned, ICCS obviously has a lower price point in general. And with that in mind, a lot of Canadian dealers tend to prefer it just because it's easier to send a volume of coins there without having to pay $40, $50 a coin. I will say, personally, I'm not the biggest fan of their holders. That dual layer plastic I find makes it somewhat difficult to appreciate the coin that's encapsulated.
Do you think it's possible that the coins have a higher chance of getting damaged than the ICCS holders as well?
100%. On quite a few occasions now, I've bought coins in usually older generation ICCS holders where that inner flip, the inert PVC free flip, has cracked.
Oh yeah.
Leaving the coin exposed to that soft PVC plastic that is holding everything together. And so through that lens, it makes you wonder what happens if you put your coin away in ICCS for 20, 30 years.
Yep. Just the fact too, I have at times had 10, 15, 20 ICCS coins, and if you're stacking them all on top of each other, they're constantly rubbing against each other. And there's probably it might not be the most intelligent way for me to store them, but I'm guessing that it's a lot more practical to have them in hard plastic. Those things are not getting damaged. You got to take a screwdriver and stab them to holy heck to be able to do any damage to them. Or some people will break them open with what was it you mentioned, tile nippers.
Exactly.
But for the most part, ICCS they just aren't nearly as durable. And will they stand the test of time? Who knows? But I'm sure, when did ICCS start? When was the company actually founded? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, it was around 1985, I want to say. 1985, 1986.
Okay.
That being said, as much as, in my opinion, I wouldn't put a coin away for a long time in an ICCS holder, for purely grading so that it's easier to transact on the market, I would say ICCS is definitely a good option. If you have something that's a little bit higher end, you don't necessarily want to maybe sell yourself short or sell it for too much money, definitely a good option. Send it to ICCS, only $13 a coin. There's a reason dealers like it so much.
Yeah.
But compared to PCGS and NGC, the price point at almost 4 times as much per coin, it's definitely a little bit hard to justify, but...
So what are the exact price cost minimum for a PCGS or an NGC submission? If I wanted to send a coin, what is the minimum cost that I'm going to pay today?
So I don't use NGC much. I personally don't like their Canadian grading standards too much, so I've avoided sending to them. With PCGS, the regular grading tier, which will cover you up to $2,500 US in case something happens to your coin, that costs it's $38 American, and that's not including, you got to ship it to the States. They charge you return shipping.
So you're talking $60 to $75 in cost easily just to ship. So what do you find is, what does a coin have to be worth to validate you actually sending it to PCGS? What is the minimum book value of a coin that you will send in to actually make sure that you receive a profit from it?
Well, if you want to send to PCGS, I'd either say make sure that's a coin you want to keep in your own collection, because I will say PCGS slabs do make it a lot easier to appreciate the coin, handle it as much as you want without fear of damaging it or hurting its value in the future. Or you want something that's maybe $100, $150 minimum, and you can send it in the economy tier where you get it in that slab. It's going to take you a couple extra months compared to the regular tier.
Yep.
But if you're not at that price point and you are sending it in because you want to sell it eventually, if it's anything less than $100, 9 times out of 10, it's easier to just sell it raw or sell it in an ICCS flip for sure.
Well, that's the hard answer right there. A lot of people, they like to send their commemorative Canadian stuff in. They like to send their new maples in, but honestly, I don't think it's really worth it to send that kind of stuff in. It's usually just about the same price to get the coin graded as you pay for it, and it doesn't have that much of a numismatic premium, so I don't understand it. I guess there's a market for it, but you just heard the truth from this guy right here. Okay, so now we're going to start getting into the nitty gritty. Now, one of the things that Cole specializes in is Canadian pre 1970 specimen coins. Now, when it comes to the early Canadian specimen coins, they are extremely rare and valuable. A lot of the time, they would make less than how many sets would they make every year?
About, well, for the more common years, maybe 1,000 sets, with the exception being 1967, which had 30,000 sets issued. But for most of the other dates, the top you'd expect is maybe 300 to 500 sets.
One of the things when it comes to Canadian pre-1970 specimen coins, it is almost impossible to find accurate information on them. The only way I've been able to find any information is basically from people like Cole, maybe on Facebook. But if you were to go online right now and go to Coins in Canada or even the Royal Canadian Mint's website, they have articles for just about every section and date range of Canadian coins. And then when you get to the specimen coin section, it is whited out. You can't click on it, and they don't have any information or archives. I don't know if the Canadian Mint was bad at keeping files back in the day, or if they just like to keep those coins hush-hush exactly what is going on. But I just wanted you to explain basically just some of the ins and outs of the Canadian specimen coin market, what to look for, and basically what it's all about.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the big issue with getting into this end of collecting coins is the information, or lack thereof. There are mint records from the 30s, 40s, 50s era, but like you mentioned, missing is any information on these special sets that were issued. For those interested in trying to find out more information, obviously the Charlton catalog does have some info scattered throughout it, but a couple other places to look are actually old auction catalogs of major Canadian sales. A lot of the times they won't have much information with the lots, but some, especially like the Norweb catalog from 1996, the Cornerstone catalog from a few years back, the auctioneers and those that were selling these coins did put a lot of time to put some context with the lots as well. And those are great places to get a little bit of insight on why the collectors may have been putting them away, as well as what during those times the coins were expected to have in terms of mintage figures, in terms of rarity.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you get your idea? Like when it comes to, you say some sets have 1,000 mintages, some or a mintage of 1,000, some will have mintages of 300. Where are you getting those mintage figures from? Like where are you fed your information on specimen coins from?
Unfortunately, a lot of it does have to be speculation, just because there isn't accurate information out there. One of the earlier references that did some of this speculation and tried to pinpoint maybe what the range would be is the Kraus World Coin Catalog.
Okay.
And in that one auction catalog I just mentioned, the Norweb sale of 1996, they do reference the Kraus quite a few times on what the estimated mintage figures of those different dates would be.
What year was this coin catalog produced?
The Kraus, it's continually updated, but I want to say it's been around since like the 50s or 60s.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is it like a huge thick one, or
Super
okay?
thick.
I think they might have pulled it out of the coin shop because I
Yeah.
brought some silver German coins in, and they were trying to get prices for them or whatever.
It's a very standard reference catalog for sure, and unfortunately they're also going off speculation, but with it, that's all you can really go off of.
But that's what adds a lot of the value and intrigue to these specimen coins, is that there's so much mystery. Like when it comes to the old U.S. coins, like when you talk about specimen Morgan dollars, some of the proof like Morgans, and you get into some of those crazy old flowing hair half dollars, like there is a lot of information about them, and there's a lot of American collectors. There's so much information and videos out there, and there's almost nothing on these specimen coins. Like they are like holy grails, unicorns, and I feel like they fly under the radar when it comes to like world coin collecting all over the world. They are probably some of the rarest coins in the world, right? Like you're saying 300 sets for some of these. So that means some of these coins have mintage figures of 300 or less. And then I think, what was it, the 1938 specimen set? Mm-hmm. You said there's like 10 of them or something. Or
yeah, that particular set, it has been somewhat well documented. And of course, we don't have a piece of paper from 1938 saying that only 6 were made. But essentially, since the 50s, only 6 examples of penny, dime, quarter, and half dollar have surfaced.
Oof.
And since the 50s, no others have surfaced. Now, the dollars were produced in higher numbers. I think there's something like 15 known today. And the nickel, only 3 have ever been known from those original 6 sets that were distributed back in the day. 3 of the sets seem to have business strike nickels in them. Why that is, couldn't tell you. But what we know now is there's only 3 nickels floating around. But that's the thing, right? You know, if you go to the Krause, I think they quoted 10 to 15 sets. But since the 50s, only 6 have been known. So that's where that mintage figure is sort of solidified.
Interesting. There's always some tomfoolery when it comes to mint employees too. Like I made a video recently on the most unusual Canadian coin errors, and you've actually brought up to me there's like Montreal Olympic coins from the 70s that have like pennies stamped into them, and just so when it comes to like specimen sets that have 1938 business strikes, like who knows if maybe some of the employees maybe just did a little switcheroo, or like there's just so much tomfoolery when it comes to the Canadian Mint and their early practices. Okay, so before we end things on specimen coins, another thing that I definitely wanted to get into was provincial specimen sets. Like I'm not sure, Newfoundland I think made some specimen sets, possibly New Brunswick and some of the other provinces. So can you just touch a little bit on some of the information about provincial specimen sets, when they started making them, when they stopped making them, and basically just any information you can tell us?
Yeah, with the provincials, there's actually a little bit more info floating around, just because the vast majority of them would have been minted in London or in Birmingham.
Okay.
Like New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, those provinces, they all have sets of their original coinage that were issued. And a lot of these sets would have stayed over in England, and most of them have ended up institutionalized. The Victoria Albert Museum in Australia has quite a few of these early Canadian and Canadian provincial specimens that came straight from the mint.
I think there was also, because you do mention Australia, the 1911 silver dollar, right, is like the Holy Grail. I think one of the employees from the mint took the silver dollar to Australia, and like his family held it over there for like 30 or 40 years or something like that, before it was brought back to North America. Isn't that like, there's some story about that? So.
Yeah, surprisingly, that particular museum in Australia, on quite a few occasions, ended up with some fantastic Canadian, and I know they had a few exhibitions during those years where they would have put them out on display. There's also a few really rare Canadian specimens of that era that seem to have been struck after they should have been, specifically to be sent to Australia for these exhibitions, for that museum, as archival pieces.
Interesting. So a lot of the time you mentioned that when they strike these specimen sets, they'll give them to royal dignitaries, maybe employees of the mint. So a lot of these provincial sets they were striking and sending to Australia, and Australia held on to them and kept them in their museums, essentially.
It seems they had a near comprehensive collection of a lot of that earlier Canadian specimen.
Interesting. Yeah, I actually made a video recently about how the Canadian Mint sued the Australian Mint for infringing on their patents on the 2004 poppies. That was pretty interesting. But it's funny how the Canadian Mint like used to be all buddy-buddy with Australia until they steal their technology.
Well, it wasn't even it was London. It was London sending them over.
Because London was making this. So was London just sending them over, or sending them on behalf of Canada, or how was it?
Off the top of my head, I want to say anyone interested in that particular story, seek out the Cornerstone catalog. Sandy Campbell, the dealer who did that fixed price list sale, he put a lot of really great information on some of those one-of-one specimens. And I could be misquoting, but I do feel like he did put in some original documents. But I might be thinking of a separate catalog there that would have had those.
Okay. When it comes to some of these catalogs, though, finding them can be just as hard as finding some of these specimen coins, you know?
That's the issue. Like, when it comes to the earlier catalogs, some of them have been uploaded for free use on the internet. The Norweb catalog, which I've mentioned a few times already, that is just available for anybody to view on the Newman Numismatic portal.
Okay, so you're actually working right now part-time at a coin shop here in Ontario. I won't say what city it's in because they want to keep it hush-hush. A lot of these shop owners, you know, they like to operate things on the... actually, I think a gold shop in London, Ontario just got robbed and the owner got shot the other day, which is like absolutely terrible. And you got to be careful when you got lots of valuables and lots of money. There's people out there that'll take advantage. But the point of where I'm trying to get here is you're working part-time in a coin shop right now. And how are you liking it?
It's a lot of fun. I'm going to be honest. It's a lot busier than I expected it is. I'm on contract right now with them for their e-commerce, and it's crazy. The market's definitely alive. The market is definitely alive.
Have you noticed like an uptick, or has it just been steady? Or
Well, it's hard to say. Through the holidays, there's definitely an uptick in sales, but that's to be expected. People buying Christmas gifts and such. But with that in mind, we've been listing more online as well, so it's hard to say if it's the market itself kind of getting a little bit hotter, or if it's just the fact that we have more product to offer.
I got you. So, do they also sell actual Royal Canadian Mint, like new pieces as well? Do they stock like the new
Yep.
Cuneys and stuff like that? So, around the holidays, what are like the big sellers? Are people buying silver? Are they buying old numismatic pieces? Are they buying collectors' Royal Canadian Mint items? Like, what are the big sellers?
The big sellers for us are really those, collector items, better date stuff for people trying to fill the hole in their collections. That's what we
Interesting.
find sells the most frequently. Now, obviously, bullion's always going to be the largest volume at any coin shop. There's
Yes.
always people buying, always people selling. So through that lens, maybe that, but from the more interesting side of things, it's definitely those meat and potatoes, 47 varieties, the 48s,
47.64 water.
exactly,
Stuff like that.
$45,
In and out all day long.
everything that somebody's looking for, and everyone has that album that's got the missing spot. That's what tends to sell the easiest.
Let's say I walk into your coin shop today and I have the 1964 extra waterline nickel in like a low grade state. Maybe we'll call it like VF or something like that.
Right.
Will you guys buy that off me?
Honestly, no.
Okay. What's the lowest grade kind of stuff that you guys will buy at your shop?
Well, for anything like that, where it's a minor variety, there's definitely a market for it, but if it's not graded, if it's not in great condition, it just takes too long to sell. There's obviously the labor involved with processing it, and unless it's in a large group, it's just not worth the paperwork, honestly.
I got you. I
Yeah.
got you. Okay, so you mentioned that the store does quite a bit of volume of bullion and precious metals. So I just wanted to get your opinion on basically how the market has been for silver, because there's been a very good time over the last year for buying silver. It's been really low. I think it was down to like 25 Canadian at one point over the last year, and it is starting to go up again. So I just want to get basically your ideas on the market, how it's been, and where you see it going in the future.
The market right now, very strong. There's a lot of people buying. There's a lot of people consistently buying. But also with the way things are economically, we are seeing a lot of people bringing in silver they've previously stacked to sell. If I could predict exactly where it's going, I could make a lot of money.
Yep.
I think right now it's maybe at a point where we can expect to see it fall a little bit.
Okay.
But I do think more people are getting interested in putting physical aside as savings. I think more people are being exposed to this economic climate where maybe they want a little bit more security going forward. So I do think things are looking good for the precious metals market.
I do know there are things too that happen in big business that affect the silver market drastically. Like I have a buddy that's invested in the company AMC. I don't know if you know the
AMC.
movie chain.
Yeah.
And when he first invested, I thought that was a terrible investment. But what I didn't know is that they actually have a lot of holdings, like a lot of property, and they actually have investments in silver and precious metals.
Okay.
Like yes,
That's
you would,
awesome.
you would
That's
think
cool.
that I was like, why would you ever? But they have their streaming service starting. But yeah, I think they actually have some money in precious metals and silver. And my buddy was talking to me, and he was saying that there's a lot of things happening right now at the top in terms of big business and industry, and he thinks that the silver is going to go up. But I don't know, maybe there'll be a little dip before this, but industry is always eating up silver. They use it for photography, they use it for medicine, they use it for all sorts of stuff. So I think it's a good investment. It's a good hedge against inflation. I very rarely have lost money off buying any form of silver. I'm assuming it's pretty much the same way. As long as you buy cheap, I suggest you buy at spot price. That's my rule of thumb. If you always buy silver at or as near to spot price as possible, you're almost never going to lose money. When it comes to some premium pieces, you might pay a little bit more. Sometimes it might be worth it, but general rule of thumb is when it comes to scrap Canadian silver, bullion, and stuff like that, you should always try and pay as close to spot or even under if you can. And I would assume that's a rule that most experienced stackers would follow. Okay, so I wanted to get your opinion on modern Royal Canadian Mint pieces. So we're talking like the new sets they released, the new Toonie Collector's Keepsake sets, where also modern Canadian Mint airs. Like I know some people are looking for like 2021 dime airs and stuff. So I just wanted to get your opinion on modern Canadian coins, both collector and numismatic, in terms of both value and collectability.
Yeah, I think the Mint has really figured out that sweet spot of creating products that people want to put away, that they want to buy, but also matching that demand. I think from a long-term investment perspective, you're probably not going to do the best putting money into modern RCM. I think 9 times out of 10, you should expect the retail maybe to not be where it trades in the future. Maybe it's going to fall a little bit. But they are creating a lot of pieces that I myself quite like, and I wouldn't even mind having in my own collection. But something where if it speaks to you, pick it up. But if you're buying it, speculating on the value, you're unfortunately probably not going to do very well.
Yeah, turning Royal Canadian Mint products, at least new ones, for a profit is very, very tricky. You have to be able to buy them for like dirt cheap if you want to be able to turn a profit on them. And then when it comes to shipping and stuff like that, you're going to lose a lot of money in that. So what kind of pieces when it comes to modern stuff would you like to add? Like I know they have like trains that are made of gold that spin, and then they have like Maple Leafs with this crazy technology, and they're like $3,000. So what kind of stuff is it that appeals to you as a collector right now?
Honestly, and this might be a boring answer, but it is those circulating commemoratives. Because it's what got me into it. I think the last 5 years, they've had a really good run of circulating commemoratives. Some of the nicest stuff I've seen them put out.
So we're talking like the colored toonies and the colored dimes, and I've been praying that they put out a colored nickel before they remove it from circulation.
Yeah, like those coins, even now, whenever I find them in nice condition, I still tuck them to the side.
Yep.
And it's always been that way for me, of course, but that's something where, you know, if I, in the future, maybe spend a little bit of money to get a nice graded example and super high grade, I know I'm not going to do well on that coin long term, but that's what speaks to me. That's what I wouldn't mind kind of spending just to enjoy.
Yeah, as a Canadian too, like I'm very proud of the work that the Canadian Mint does, especially with their technology with colored coins.
Yeah.
It's been like revolutionary and ahead of the rest of the world for most of the last 2 decades, I believe. So when it comes to modern Canadian coin errors, because I mentioned like a 2021 dime, there are some people that are asking, should I hold on to an uncirculated box of 2021 Canadian dimes and look for like doubling and stuff? Do you see there being any premium on coins like that?
For those minor varieties where it's maybe machine doubling or small die cracks or plating bubbles, I really don't think the market long term for those will be favorable. I think the issue of production numbers, there's just so many out there where anyone who wants one, they can probably find it in the wild, they can probably search it.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously major mint errors, our quality control is getting fantastic. So anything, you know, struck through, grease, missing design, anything that's super...
Clip planchettes, those are hard to find here in Canada.
Exactly.
Legit clip planchettes.
Anything where it's not a loop that's needed to see it, that's probably worth putting aside for a little bit. But
yes, you actually bought a grease air quarter off of
me. I did.
What was it, 2002? That was the most profitable coin roll hunting find sale that I've ever had. This was the buddy that I sold it to.
Yeah.
And when I pulled it to the side, I was like, you know, this looks a little different. I'm going to hold on to it. It could just be damaged. And I show it to him, and then he gets all excited. So it just shows you that there are some holy grails out there, but I think it's just a waste of time to go through a whole uncirculated box looking for like doubling or machine doubling or something like that. Like I think there's much better things you could do with your time and energy, like search old nickel rolls or just buy silver or some collectible graded pieces. Okay, so before we end this interview off, I just wanted to get your opinion because right now there is a bit of an uptick in coin collecting on both social media, and you're saying in the stores that you're seeing good sales. So I just wanted to get your opinion basically on where the state of coin collecting is right now, especially here in Canada, and where you see it going in the future.
Yeah, I think a lot of newer collectors are kind of joining the scene. People who may have the same story, they appreciated the commemoratives in circulation, they got their little tin that they add to every once in a while. And I think now with social media, a lot of those people with that interest are kind of figuring out that there's a different side to this that they never knew about. On social media myself, I get a lot of younger collectors that are reaching out, that are showing off their own coins. So through that lens, I do think there is a bright future for the hobby.
I get a lot of people messaging me on social media asking me how much their coins are worth. I'm guessing that you get a lot of those same questions, not just from me. Hopefully I don't bug you too much, but yeah, I get a lot of messages from people all around the world asking me how much their worthless Canadian pennies are.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is that you are kind, encouraging. One of the biggest problems I find on Facebook is what I would call like know-it-alls, like people that like to just like be pretentious about it and they'd like to tell people. But I think you should be open, and you should encourage new collectors as well as being willing to share information if you are an experienced collector in a friendly way, if that makes sense.
For sure.
But I would like to thank Cole very much for joining me here today. I hope you guys enjoy this video and find it helpful. He is definitely one of the greatest wealths of knowledge that I know when it comes to Canadian coins. If you guys would like to purchase anything off of his site or reach out to him, do you want to give out some of your information to the fine people?
Well, first off, thanks for having me, Danner.
No problem.
If you guys do want to check me out, I am on Instagram mainly. I post a lot of my personal coins there, and that can be found at Burlington_bullion on Instagram. And then I've also got a site where I put some of the nicer quality coins in a bit of a wide range of value, you know, anything starting from maybe $20 all the way up to $2,000, and that's burlingtonbullion.ca.
Ooh, that's a nice domain name.
Yes, sir.
I like that. Easy to remember.
Otherwise, happy collecting and keep at it.
All right. Well, we're going to show you guys some of the pieces that Cole brought here. I'm guessing there's going to be some amazing goodies in there. He usually doesn't hold out when it comes to showing off the nice stuff. So we're going to set the camera up and give you guys some close-ups on some of these amazing coins that Cole brought to show us today. Why don't you tell them like the little bit of history about that coin? I think there's a pattern and stuff. They definitely want. I'm going to forget all the information. So.
Here's a 1953 Proof-Like 66 Plus shoulder fold nickel. There's only one coin in the census finer than this particular example. The issue most of them had was in the cardboard holders they were issued in, often it would lead to them rusting. So it's very rare to find an example with no rust. This is an 1876H specimen 1 cent piece.
Oh.
I believe, if I remember correctly, there's only 4 or 6 struck with this particular die pair. But for this issue, there were 2 different specimens produced with different minor variations. And I think in total there's about 12. Here's a 1944 specimen war nickel. This year, there's 2 different distinct finishes known in specimen format. This issue that almost has luster still over that soft cameo. And then another issue that's got deeper fields and a lot stronger cameo contrast, but both are exceptionally rare. Here's an 1858 specimen 5 cent piece. 1858 is the most common year for Victorian specimens. The full set was issued probably with the total mintage of maybe 75 to 100 sets. Only about 50 examples of each denomination are known today. You can see the exceptional cameo on this piece over those beautiful rainbow surfaces. This example is somewhat low grade with the reverse being unfortunately marked up, but it's still a beautiful example. Here's an 1858 specimen 10 cent piece. This coin is original to the same set that the 1858 5 cent you may have seen prior. You can see that distinct heavy cameo contrast and lovely toning underneath. This example also being in specimen 64 has some pretty remarkable surfaces for its age. Here's a 1943 Tomback 5 cent piece, specimen 65. Though it looks like it's made of gold, this coin is 88% copper, 12% tin. In specimen, this issue isn't too rare. There's probably maybe 100 to 150 examples floating around, but with this distinct cameo contrast, it is very difficult to locate. Here's a 1953 Proof-Like quarter. This particular quarter is the finest graded with cameo attribution. It's also pedigreed to the John J. Pittman collection. This issue is really tough in Proof-Like. The official mintage figure that the mint released was 1,200 sets, but
Following that initial release, many dealers realized most of the sets were comprised of business strikes and not proof-like coins. The quarter and the dime are the easiest coins from the set, and in typical condition sell for maybe $400 or $500. This one being the finest known, unfortunately caught me lost. Here's a 1937 specimen quarter, cameo attribution. It's in specimen 65 condition. There are quite a few that outgrade it, but I find this piece just has really, really beautiful color and a beautiful presence in hand.
There you can see. I was going to say it's kind of difficult to see the cameo, but...
Here's a major mint era 1963 proof-like dollar. As you can see, there's a huge strike through on the reverse all around the 12 o'clock area. What's interesting is these coins were issued in their original packaging with a note saying that they were hand-selected. So it's funny to think a mint employee would have hand-selected this outrageous error piece.
That's like a similar...
Here's a 1943 half dollar, struck through a large piece of reading. This error type usually is not this prominent, with it being a small strip, but this example you can clearly see the detail of the reading shining through this coin. This is the only example I've seen on a Canadian coin that's so prominent. Here's a bit of a Frankenstein coin. Not only was this coin a split planchet before it was struck, but that split planchet then entered the striking chamber with a second planchet, which gave it this indent. Fun one to study. Here's a 1964 dime, struck with clash dies, meaning the obverse and reverse die that were used to strike this coin hit each other with no coin in between. So you can see, on this side it's a little easier, you'll see Elizabeth's face right to the left of the blue nose there, as well as that sail on both sides. Here's a set of 3 war nickels, all with a similar error. It's a retained die break, meaning the dies used to strike these coins fully split from one side to the other. Here you can see that prominent die crack running from about 9 o'clock to maybe 1 o'clock. And that die breaks going from about 12 to 3. The die cracks in a very similar spot, going from about 12 to 3.
What did that 44 score? That's a pretty...
Here's the finest known 1953 proof-like dime. PCGS only attributed a cameo, which I understand, but I think it's just shy of that deep cameo designation. If you've watched the 1953 quarter video, you'd know that the dime and quarter are the 2 easiest coins from the set. But that being said, any proof-like dime and proof-like 68 quality is a unicorn in itself. So having one of the rarest date is definitely not something you see every day. Here's a 1966 proof dollar, PCGS Proof 67 Deep Cameo. This particular coin is pretty hard to find. I want to say maybe only 30 to 50 are in the different censuses between NGC, PCGS, and ICCS. But with that large bead design and the high relief bust, this is one of my favorite dollars that exists. Here's another Wernickel error. This one has a very large wire segment struck through on the obverse, right on the focal point. Let's see, going from about 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Almost looks like a scratch, but I can assure you that was from a wire in between the planchet and the dies when this was originally struck.